Welcome back to the Present Fathers Podcast. Our guest in this episode is Cody Gandy. Cody is first and foremost a husband and father to 4 children. He is a former Marine and now works with Echelon Front as a leadership coach and speaker. Cody served over 5 years in the Marine Corps, serving in various different leadership roles in the infantry. The work that Cody does with Echelon Front uniquely positions him to speak to leadership as a father because he works with some of the smartest minds when it comes to training leaders across the world, and he can take all of that information and all of that knowledge and apply it to our roles as fathers. This episode is incredibly powerful. It is a masterclass in leadership principles for fatherhood. So take some notes through this one. You are not going to want to miss the lessons that Cody shares. Here are some of the key takeaways that we cover in this episode. We talk about how perspective is crucial for realizing that our problems are often not as big as they first appear. This gives us freedom to create solutions to those problems. We talk about taking ownership. No surprise, extreme ownership is a theme through this episode, and this is just as important in our role as fathers as it is anywhere else in the world. We talk about the importance of modulating our emotions, how emotional intelligence and stoicism are vital tools that fathers need to employ. We talk about having a strong why, ensuring that your purpose is clear, because without that, you are just drifting through life. On the same token, we talk about the importance of having strategic thinking and vision as a leader, especially within your family. Cody gives some incredible advice as it relates to strategic thinking, so listen up to that one. We also talk about balancing resiliency and toughness through adversity, as well as embracing vulnerability for intimacy with your key relationships. This goes with your wife, with your children, business partners. This is a skill that men need to master. And finally, we end on talking about how to create core memories with your family and how the experiences that we foster as fathers is one of the most important things we can do while we have our children with us. So with that, let's welcome Cody Gandy to the Present Fathers Podcast. Cody, welcome to the show. How are you, brother?
Good. Appreciate the time. Appreciate the getting me in here, and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, man. Super pumped. Looked up your background. I think we have a lot of things in common, a lot of similar goals that we are trying to accomplish kind of culturally and things like that. So I'm very excited to hear your perspective on fatherhood and masculinity and things like that. So could you start by just telling us a little bit about who you are? Tell us about your family, how many little kiddos you got running around, and then we'll go into your background.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So my full name's Cody Gandy. Originally from Northern California, up in Sacramento. I currently live in Arizona, in the East Valley. I've been married going on 7 years next month. I have 4 kids under the age of 6. So I have a 6-year-old. My oldest is a boy. My 5-year-old is a boy, and then my youngest are daughters. So we have 6, 5, 4, and
Nice.
2 in 2 weeks. So that's
Nice.
the limit. The 4, we have our own little fire team. It's what me and my wife wanted. Even when we started dating, that was a discussion, and we both aligned on that. So we currently reside in Arizona, and I work for a company called Echelon Front, where primarily a bunch of military dudes, SEALs, and Marines, and we teach leadership, travel around the world, and take on our perspective from the military and teach leadership to whoever you can possibly think of, and tie it in personally and professionally to the people that we work with.
I love it, man. That's got to be a pretty fun job. I'm a little jealous, not gonna lie. Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your upbringing? What was your family life like, and ultimately what led you into the Marine Corps, and kind of we'll just go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, again, grew up in Sacramento area. So obviously that's the capital, about an hour and a half north of the Bay Area, for those familiar with California. Born and raised, mom and dad are from that area. My dad's a cop out there. He's been a cop my entire life, and that actually pushed me to who I wanted to be growing up. Uh, Living in a house where dad's a cop in the early 90s. I was born in 91. It was, cooler than it is today, and had a lot of kids that wanted to come to the house and learn about my dad and hear the stories at dinner. And my dad was a coach throughout my entire life and would show up in uniform and all that fun stuff. So that played a huge role into who I am. My mother on the other side is a real estate agent, been that my whole entire life. So real go-getter, hunter on her own end, trying to get out and establish a business. And then I have a younger sister that is 4 years younger than me. So spent a lot of time in Northern California. Never wanted to join the military. Ended up joining the Marine Corps. Wasn't really in the cards. Wanted to go into law enforcement. That was my thing. Turned 18, started to make 18-year-old decisions, and found myself playing college football. was relatively small, but it was still my dream and my passion. Went the JUCO route and then tried to walk on. Ended up blowing out my knee and thought my life was over. Because one thing I've learned, whether I was younger or how old I am now, is perspective is a hell of a thing, and most of us don't have enough of it. And so at 18, I thought my life was over. Had some very influential people, mentors in my life that were actually in the military. One family member that was a SEAL, and one of my best friends was in the Marine Corps. And I remember hurting my knee, having surgery, and these guys were calling back to me to see how I was doing. And I really started to understand what a problem actually is. Because what I think, especially these days, dealing with people and talking to leaders across the world, is a lot of the problems that we have are typically inconveniences to other people have going on. And even as a father now, I get frustrated at my 6-year-old for doing a 6-year-old thing. When in reality, I know a lot of people wish they had kids and they can't have them. So perspective has been a big part of my life. And at 18, I granularly started to understand that, and that totally just wiped everything that I was doing. And I went to the recruiter on crutches, and he was like, "Hey, I can't touch you for about 12 months." Left a couple months later, and I loved my time in the Marine Corps. I served in the infantry, spent just under 6 years in Virginia, and then ended up in Hawaii, in Kaneohe Bay with 2-3. So learned a lot at a very young age, thrust into leadership positions, got to travel the world and do a lot of fun stuff. And then after I got out, I decided to move to Arizona with one of my buddies to go to school. Wanted a fresh start from everything. Met my wife about 2 weeks in, and really the rest is history. Joined Echelon Front in 2018. I got out in 2015, and it's been 6 years since I've been a part of the team working for Jocko, Leif. A lot of people familiar with those guys. Um, Biggest honor of my life to get to work with that team and those people, and love what I get to do now.
Super cool, man. Yeah, I love the point you made about perspective. That is just like, especially younger men. Like, I hope they take that point to heart, because it's so easy for us to just lock into something and think all of our life depends on this thing happening or not, right? And in reality, if we just step back a little bit and kind of surround ourselves with other people to kind of show us the bigger picture, we realize how insignificant a lot of things really are. And they may be painful, but they're not really disastrous, right? And that's just such a powerful thing to hold within us. And when we constantly exercise that, we show up as a better person for the people in our lives, because we're not just completely in our own headspace about the things we're worried about or the thing that went wrong. And it's kind of the next day, right? The next rep. So I just love that point you made. It's so beautiful, man. Brandon, you got something?
Yeah, I would say that most people, I catch them saying, "I have to do this and I have to do that." It's no. I get to do this. I get to do that. Right. So, like you're saying, you shift that perspective. It's so good, man. So yeah, very excited to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, I love that thought in itself. And as much as I wish I had this revelation at 18, it really was. I enlisted in the Marine Corps and I heard these stories, and then I started to deploy and train with a bunch of foreign countries that work with us, and seeing the civilian populace in certain countries bring their kids up and want to give their
Yeah.
kids away. I'm like, that's their only rational thought is, yeah, I'm the parent, but I'm going to give my kid to somebody else because that might give them a better life. That's a problem. um, and so I know, and I'm not to take away what people deal with, because I mean, I don't know what I don't know, and the four of us, we all have different problems that we face. But what I've learned is majority of our problems, not all of them, but majority of them in the grand scheme of life really aren't that big of a deal. And if I was to put 30 people from across the world and everybody give their one problem in the middle of the room and talk about it, we'd be real quick to go grab our own problem, be like, I really want my issue back, and handle that in comparison to what other people have going on. So
Yeah. I saw that play out just vividly. I went to a place called Mighty Oaks. Maybe you're aware of that. Um, but in the group, right, people share their stories and then their traumas and all that kind of stuff. And after like two or three other people had shared, I was like, yeah, I'm good with my stuff. I'm going to keep my problems. Like, just talk the stories I heard from these other men, just the things they'd been through. I was like, yeah, I just need to toughen up a little bit, and that's not to diminish anything we've been through, but that's a healthy, powerful motivator, right? Like, that gave me, from that experience, people who are listening to this, it gave me the ability to kind of reframe where I was at and take ownership, which I'm sure we're going to talk about very soon. The things that I could have control over, the things I could be better at immediately for the betterment of myself and my family, instead of making excuses. And that came from perspective. And before that, I was, I'd built up this prison of what I thought life was like. And so without that perspective, you're just stuck. And so, yeah, man, Love that so much. I think, Brandon, you got something? Go for it.
Mike Goblin there. All right, so I've always quoted, I love Extreme Ownership by Jocko there and Leif, and extreme ownership is taking responsibility for everything in your world, even when it's not your fault, right? And so, how do you embody like the principle of extreme ownership into your leadership style for your own personal family? Do you have like certain things that you do?
Yeah, and just to clarify, so yeah, what I teach effectively is this book, Extreme Ownership. And ownership is we're taking accountability, responsibility, ownership of everything that we play a role in. I'm not going to go to George and call George and be like, everything that's in your life, that's your problem, that's my responsibility, because that doesn't make sense. But if something affects me or affects my mission, then I'm going to see what role I play and I'm going to take responsibility. And are there outliers for that? Sometimes, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but sometimes stuff just happens and you are receiving a problem. And then the ownership is, well, how do I respond to that? It's your response to the issues at hand. So just to clarify that point in itself. But in terms of personally for me, I mean, as an instructor at Echelon Front, the one must you have to do is you have to live this stuff. So we teach relationships. We teach how to be an effective communicator. We teach how to detach, which is not letting our emotions or ego dictate our actions. We teach empowering others, and we teach ownership, obviously. If I'm being honest, typically people that hire us or anybody that gets around this stuff, there's two sides you want to work on. It's professionally and personally. Well, professionally, there's not a lot of work for me because I teach this every single day. Additionally, I work with a team full of instructors. I work with Jocko, who wrote this stuff. So it's a lot easier for me. Not that I don't still struggle, but it's a lot easier for me on professionally because everybody on my team is effectively doing this. Now at
Sure.
home, and this goes for everybody, at home it's a lot harder. And I feel it's a lot harder because of the relationships at home. Whereas my spouse, my wife Paige, she knows what buttons to push, she knows what words to say to, get under my skin. And my kids and all our kids are little carbon copies of herself, and they do stuff and you see yourself in it, and then you get frustrated, you overreact, and then you regret it, etc. So I think for me personally, this stuff is 10x harder to do at home because it's my kids, it's my family, and my relationships at home are way stronger than they are at work, obviously, because it's my family. But that added emotional connection makes things a lot harder to do. So that's still something that I mean, I'm 6 years in. I'm on the road 200 plus days a year talking to whoever you could think. So at work, it's easy, but at home, it's a different ball game. But I think for everybody, it's just, it takes time. We teach counterintuitive human nature, which means it takes time. It's a campaign to actually implement these things in itself. So a little more challenging at home, but that's where I want to do it more than anywhere. So that's what my job is to do, essentially, as a father and a husband.
I think
Awesome.
taking ownership is the best way to learn. When I was 20 years old, I sold books door to door. Worst job of my life. I completely failed at it. And for years, I told myself I was selling encyclopedias door to door. Of course I failed. Who could possibly succeed at that? I finally took ownership of it. I had friends who did great. And I realized it was me. I had a bad attitude about it. I didn't really try. And it was so important for me to fail so abjectly in that setting. When I finally did take ownership of it, it allowed me to succeed and grow from that point. So that was a huge moment for me. So it's really all about ownership.
100%. I mean, it's such a simple concept, right? It's not a foreign word. I mean, I teach basically fundamental things. It's ownership, accountability, responsibility, everything, all those words everybody's heard, yet it's not our natural tendency. Our tendency is to blame. Our tendency is to stand in the corner and let somebody else take responsibility. And people may disagree, at least where they're at right now, but this is a habit that's forged in all of us. I'd be willing to bet and assume, which I know you're not supposed to make assumptions, but all of us have kids. Does anybody's kids love to take responsibility or accountability when they mess something up? Traditionally, no. Traditionally, they do anything in their power to be like, it just happened. Like the milk just spilled by itself. And of course, we're like, that's not how it works. But it that's how it plays out. And if people don't have kids, they were kids. So this is a universal principle because spilling the milk as a kid, the consequences, they're not that bad. But when you get older, and now I'm 32 years old, the consequences for my actions are drastically higher. Therefore, my tendency isn't to say that's my fault, that's my responsibility, because there's liability, there's accountability, there's all this stuff, this burden associated with ownership. Therefore, we default like, well, that was George. Like Dustin sent the email, Brandon drove the car, my wife didn't tell me what to do. And so that's our default tendency. So we're trying to spin the narrative and actually truly assess, hey, if my kids do the wrong thing, that's my fault. 100%. But it's a lot easier to say, well, they just did that. That's their responsibility. But they're 6'5", 4'2". Like, of course they're gonna make mistakes. But I'm the dad. That's my responsibility to fix it, correct it, and make sure they're moving in the right direction later on in life.
So Cody, at what age do you start trying to teach your kids to take ownership and to be responsible? Is 6 too young? Can you start trying to instill those habits?
I've been doing it the last, well, obviously not when my oldest son was 1. I'd say ooh, the last 3 years I've really been pressing it. And for me, here's how I go about it. So my kids are gonna make mistakes. They're kids. They draw the Sharpie on the wall. They do dumb stuff all the time. We just moved to Arizona and they cut all the drip system in the backyard with snips. Like, that stuff happens. And so for me, when bad things happen or wrong things happen, me and my wife know, and we ask questions. Hey, what happened? Somebody talk me through it. And then basically for us, we reassure them that, hey, if you tell us the truth, you're not going to get in more trouble. We don't want to diminish that. Hey, mistakes, you can make mistakes wherever you want, because as they get older, there's consequences for actions. But we want to reassure them that by telling the truth, by taking accountability and ownership, that there's no there's no more that we're going to stack up on. If anything, we applaud them, say, hey, thank you so much. I know there's 4 of you and one of you did this action, but Bear, who's my oldest, hey, thanks, son, for letting me know that was your fault. Hey, that's still the wrong thing to do. Like, please don't cut the sprinkler system ever again. But the fact that you told the truth, I'm not going to punish you as much. So that's what I've done. And if I'm being honest, my 6-year old's pretty good at it, which is pretty crazy. Some of my other kids, it's a default tendency. It's easier to, especially with 4 or 3 siblings, to be like, well, it was my brother, it was my sister, it was my dad when he was in New Jersey and I'm in Arizona. So, but for me, I'm starting right now because we're talking about habits and tendencies, and I want to embed those habits early, so that as they get older, because I'm not naive. I think we all shouldn't be naive. Our kids are going to go out in the world without us. They're going to make decisions, and when push comes to shove, they have a choice. They're gonna have a choice to take ownership or not. And if me trying to build this habit is forged with them, then maybe down the road their own intuition is, you know what, I made the wrong decision, I did the wrong thing, this is my fault. Hopefully they're able to do that. So that is my goal in itself,
Yeah.
because one thing we teach at Echelon Front is called decentralized command, which basically we're empowering other people to make decisions. That's parenting in itself. What I want more than anything is when all my 4 kids turn 18 is they go out into the world and they're able to make decisions, not because their dad told them to, but that's what they believe is the right decision. Because right now they go to school by themselves. I travel a bunch. They're in the world. And as much as I'm the dad there to influence them to do the right thing, I'm competing against other influences. And that's on TV, eventually with social media. That's the school bullies and all that stuff. I cannot think that I'm not competing with them. So my goal more than anything, if I can get them to take ownership when they get older into adulthood, when they have kids, like, I think that's winning as a parent. Not to say when they get older and they're in their 20s, they call to me to help, because I'm always on the hook. Like, this is a never ending process, but they're going to be in a lot of situations. And more importantly, they're going to have to make split second decisions with their dad and mom not by their side. And if they have this ownership in their back pocket where that's a default tendency, I think that's going to set them up for success later on in life.
Do you tie like kind of the ownership and doing the right thing and all that kind of stuff to family values? Like, have you, I mean, they're 6 and under, still pretty young, but I mean, have you done something like that?
Yeah, I mean, not as in depth. I feel like maybe,
Okay.
I mean, my 2-year-old is, well, she's not 2, she's almost 2. She's still just,
Right.
you know, crazy. But my older kids, we're not really calling them family values yet, but there's still certain things that is a common theme because it is a family value to me and my wife. But honesty is one of them. Doing the right thing and taking care of people, like, that's our 3 things right now that we're focusing on. And as we get older, we'll expand, and maybe some of them change down the road. We're not pigeonholed to anything, but for us, honesty, doing
Yeah.
the right thing, and then taking care of each other, I think that's huge. I put, as weird as to say, I put my kids in a lot of, I'm not gonna say stress. I say stressful lightly. I challenge them with
Yes.
time, with doing things, with the goal that they have to work together to accomplish the task. Because as much as we're all individual people and we do individual things, being part of a team is something crucial that 99% of people are gonna have to be a part of, and that's hard because We're humans, we're selfish, we have tendencies. So for me, working as a team, working with each other, looking out for each other. Like my 6-year-old, like he's the dad when I'm not home. Like he's looking after his younger brother who's the same size as him, and he's supposed to make decisions when I'm not home. And my daughter, who's 4, she's supposed to take care of her little sister. Like I want to build that in with them because one, I'm gone a lot, and I want them to be extremely tight. And two, probably the unfortunate reality is I'm going to be gone, and they're only going to have each other effectively. If I do this right, like I know sometimes, especially in the military, dads bury their sons, right? I want my kids to bury me later on in life with the hope that they have the 4 of them. They can handle anything thrown their way. Obviously, they're going to grow up and grow apart and have families and things like that, but their blood, their siblings, and I want them to be as close as possible because the world doesn't care about what you're going through. They don't care that your brothers and sisters or you had a good upbringing or from a Marine family. Like the world does not care. And so if they have something they can fall back on, their brother and sister, that's a safe haven, so to say. I mean, I'm working on that every single day because I feel later on in life, it's only gonna be a matter of time before an occasion happens. They're going to parties as kids in college, etc. Bad things are going to happen, and if mom and dad aren't there for whatever reason, they have 3 other people they can fall back on to help make decisions.
That's such a great clarifying distinction, especially with children. Like my son, I told my son, your sister is going to be the most important person in your life for the first 18 years of your life, besides your mom and dad, because your sibling is one of the few people that you will have a intentional relationship for the rest of your life with. And that, like you said, they're a safe haven. So like one of the things that we do to foster that is like when we go out to eat, we make them sit at their own table. And so they're sitting there together and they're just chatting and this little 2-person little table right next to ours, and but they're in their own table, so they're doing their own thing, and that fosters that. But yeah, I love that, man, because it's so important to be intentional with that, because if we don't, then you have kids that fight and bicker and they're always at each other's throats, and like that you can see long-term effects from that. So it's definitely great that you're doing that. It's so good.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, siblings are gonna, especially mine are so close, like they're gonna butt heads, they're gonna fight and want the toy that the other one wants, etc. My boys are in football right now. They love sports. It's something big in my world, so it's got passed on to them. Anytime they bicker, anytime they fight, I make 2 of them go against me, and the only way they win is if they use teamwork to effectively beat me. If they go 1 versus 1, they lose every single time. But if they go 2 versus 1, I'll let them win, and they hopefully probably recognize later on in life that well, the only way we beat Dad, who's 5 times bigger than them, is because we used teamwork. It wasn't me, Jet. It wasn't
Mhm.
me, Bear. It was both of us because 2 is stronger than 1. So, but that
Yeah.
thought on the dinner itself, like you're putting them in situations where almost you're forcing the environment, but the conversations in the relationship, like that's up to them to do. So, um, being intentional with the environment and situations, I mean, that's how you do it. And the rest, it naturally happens. Because the last thing you want is later in life, the kids are like, dad did this on purpose, right? No, like you create the environment, but they create the reactions and the opinions and
Yeah.
everything else. Like that's the indirect way to do it. I love that.
Right. That's kind of why I asked about family values too, because in the same way, you build esprit de corps in the military and kind of that unit identity and pride and everything. You do the same thing with your family, right? Like, so, I talk a lot I have one daughter, I talk a lot about how like, Hayworths are brave and Hayworths are kind and respectful and we do the right thing and we work hard. And, that's just like, that's who we are. And she buys into that identity, and that's the stuff that she's going to believe about herself as we go on later in life, and she goes off on her own. So everything you're saying and tying it to values and all that kind of stuff is just super powerful. And I think, for the dads listening, that's on you, right? You're the head. It's on you to set the tone. It's on you to take the ownership and the leadership of those types of concepts and pushing your kids into those situations like Cody was talking about, to challenge them and help them grow effectively. Ultimately it's on you. So like it or not, that's the job you signed up for when you became a dad. So take action. Um, Cody, I was wondering if we could switch gears a little bit, because something sparked earlier in the conversation that I wanted to transition to, talking about kind of like authentic masculinity, right? I think a lot of guys today, especially younger men, are really confused on like, well, what should I be, right? Do I just need to be this tough warrior, or do I need to be like smart and refined and gentle and all these kinds of things? And we talk a lot about this, But it dawned on me that like you travel a lot, right? You've interacted with tons of people from all over the country, potentially all over the world. What are some of the things that you've learned through your experiences in life in general, or also through Echelon Front? What are the things that make better men, right? What are the things the modern man needs to be an effective leader, not just in business but also at home?
Oh man, that's a good one. um, as cliche as it is, I have to start. I think just having a framework of ownership, because things are going to happen, mistakes are going to be made, stuff's going to happen to you that you're not prepared for, whether identifying what role you played in or your response to it. Like, there's nothing worse than being someone that blames everybody, has this victim mentality where the world's out to get them. Because the reality is, I mean, I know a lot of people where the world's out to get them, the narrative is already painted, like they can't do no right, and I feel bad for them, because a victim mentality, not to take away from bad things happening, and there's a time to grieve, there's a time for somebody to be a victim, but when you continue down this victim mentality, effectively you're waiting for someone or something to solve your problems for you. And let's be honest, that's not how this works. Nobody's banging down my front door and be like, hey, Cody, I'm here to solve all your problems. The world doesn't care what problems I have. The world's going to move. If I had the worst day of my life today, the world's not going to care tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. The world's going to move right along. So I think just our response to things, even more so bad things, as a man, as a husband, as a father, that's my duty as an individual, to take that burden. And I wanted to tie that in before I give my final answer. I think as a father and as a husband specifically, I like to say there's a burden associated with that. And the burden has typically a negative connotation, right? It's a weight that you carry, and but I love that weight. Like, it's the greatest honor that I have is being a husband to my wife. I wanted to be married for a long time. Growing up, I couldn't wait to be a dad and a husband, and I got married when I was 26 years old, and now I have 4 kids. And my kids, yes, they're my greatest leadership challenge, but it's the best thing that I could ever do in my life. Nothing ever compares. The military, Echelon Front, it does not compare. So that burden, and what a burden is everything I say, everything I don't say, everything I do, everything I don't do, it carries consequences. And as a father and as a husband, I'm being watched and judged by everything that I do. And you know what? Good. I like that. I enjoy that. I don't want it any other way. I don't want to hide in the shadows. I don't want nobody to know what's going on. I don't want people to look at me and see what I'm doing. I don't want to shy away from that spotlight, so to say. So I wanted to touch on that burden piece. But I think for me, masculinity in itself, obviously there's the stoicism, there's toughness, mental toughness, etc. Not to be confused with the robot that turns off their emotions, that is they're at a funeral, everybody's crying, and they're just there. Like, I don't think that's the right way to go. I think the best way to spin masculinity is someone that can modulate depending on the situation, depending on what they're going through. Because is there a time and place to be upset? Yes. God forbid my wife got in a car accident. And if I show up and she's on her deathbed going through something hard, and I'm just like, oh, I hope you get better. Like, what the hell's the matter with me? Like, that's not what I want
Right.
to be. So modulating that depending on the situation, and what that actually stems down to is being in control of our emotions in itself. So
Yep.
something we teach at Echelon Front is called detachment, and it's the hardest thing that we teach. And effectively all it is you're not letting your emotions, your ego, or your perspective dictate what you do. And so for me, look, typically men, they're easy to get angry and upset. So what we're trying to do is not let that anger, that frustration, which is a temporary feeling, not lead to a permanent solution or an action. That is a skill. I think that's masculinity, because things are going to piss us off, and the little things, you get cut off in traffic, your flight gets delayed, somebody bumps into you at a bar, like, it's actually easy to react and get angry and get upset and fight somebody, and then what do we typically do after the fact? We regret it, because we look like an a-hole, we look like someone that can't control what we're doing. Not to say somebody attacks you and punches you in the face, I'm not saying just stand there and let it happen, but being able to modulate that, I think that's the true definition of masculinity in itself. Is there is a time and place to be stoic, to not let those emotions show, for you as the husband, as the father, to take on that burden while everybody else is sad, for you to handle everything else. There's a time and place. There's also when my 3-year-old daughter is going through something challenging, or when she's 13, broken up with her first boyfriend, for me to let my guard down to somebody that I'm close with to show her that, you know what, it's okay to be upset. Because what I don't want is later on in life, my 28-year-old son is like, yeah, my dad told me never be emotional. Because it's not going to go well for him. He's going to run into issues. And I learned that the hard way. Because when I first started dating my wife and we ran into some issues, long story, our biggest friction was that I wasn't emotional, because that's what I thought a man should be. And I learned that from my dad, who's a cop. I learned that in the Marine Corps, like, you don't let emotions show, more or less like you're a robot. And that's sad, because I remember going through a lot of hard stuff, and she's upset, she's crying, and there I am like, what's the big deal? Not that I'd say that out loud, but that was my thought. And that's sad. That's not being a man. That's not doing the right thing. And so I had to learn to modulate this, because there's a time and place for everything. So for me, I think it's not letting those things dictate your actions, because what a man shouldn't do is regret what he does. Now, is regret part of life? Absolutely. Like, we're human beings. But the less
Yeah.
regret you have means the more control you have of your action, your attitudes, your emotions, your opinion. That's a man. Because somebody that can take all the stuff that happens in the world and just say, you know what, good, bad things are happening, that's okay. Or all the stuff is happening, let me modulate it, let me talk to people. Like, that's what I want to be able to do. And that's something that I'm still working on trying to master in itself.
I think
Long
we're all
answer.
still trying.
Sorry.
Yeah,
So
no, that's
good.
great. I think
No,
we're
that's
still
great.
all trying to master it. It's so masculinity is not hiding our emotions or pretending we don't have them, but modulating them and using them in a powerful way. I love that. So, and I wanted to speak on the burden that you mentioned. Having that burden is what makes us matter, right? So this nihilism, this cultural feeling that we have that we need to just detach and not have anything that matters, and it might hurt us if we have a family and it's too much work. That's terrible, right? So having that burden and knowing that my actions matter is so powerful and such a great motivator for me, that I love that burden. It gets me up every day, and I know that that's the reason I have to do what I'm doing.
Yeah, I love that. I mean,
Brandon, you
it's.
gotta.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, respond, Cody. Sorry.
You said it motivates you. I think a better term is, my family, my wife, my kids, they're my why. And when you have a strong why, specifically a family, it drives you to do the right thing when you don't want to. It tells you to sacrifice the things that you want for the things that you need. And I think that's powerful, because there's a lot of things that, I want to be doing that don't benefit my family, my community, Echelon Front, because, I'm just a person, and things go like that. But when I have this strong why, when push comes to shove, when things hit my door, like, that tells me what to do. And typically it's not even a thought, like, oh, you know what? I know exactly what I need to do right now. That's part of the reason I'm heavily involved in fitness. I love to work out, but you know what I want to be able to do is, when I get older, I know I'm relatively younger, I'm 32, but when my kids are in their 20s, or my kids are in their 30s and they have kids, I want to be able to get off the couch and actually do something. And I know that's strategic thinking 30 years down the road, but if I can't be naive and think that, you know what, 25 years, then I'll figure it out, and then I'll get behind the curve. Like, that's not what I want to do. And so I think that why is a huge driver. It does motivate us, but motivation is fleeting. With your why is strong enough, it will dictate what to do and when to do it, because of what you have back at home for you.
So good. Well, it's funny that we're talking about masculinity, because I was actually journaling last week and I came up with I wrote a quote, and I'd love to read it about masculinity. And it goes like this: it's true masculinity is found in the balance between resilience in adversity and the vulnerability in intimacy.
Mm.
And I think man, I had to dive deep for that one.
That
But
was good.
I love that there is a time and a place, and it's in a place of intimacy. And that's what I tell my son all the time. It's like, there are times to have emotions, and I think that's just part of being learning to be emotionally intelligent, right? And to be regulated in your emotions as well, like, when and where and what the appropriate timing is. So,
Yeah, I think as a
and it,
dad, there's this not cliche, but there's typically a mindset that you teach your sons to be unemotional, or their boys aren't supposed to cry. I think they're supposed to cry about certain things. When my 2-year-old takes away the monster truck from my 5-year-old, that's not something you cry about. But when our family dog passes away, that's the time and place, and it's okay to show emotion. So I think teaching them how to modulate this, and hey, son, there is a time and place. I look back in the day and I was shown like, hey, sadness, all those things, it's weakness, and so you just don't show it, you just bottle it up. And what I've learned, as you bottle things up, and I think we all can agree, you bottle things up, it's not bottled forever, it's coming out, and it's coming out the worst way at the worst moment when nobody expects it. So I think teaching kids, even girls in itself, like there's a time and place. We don't want someone to be a nervous wreck, hyper emotional every second of every day, like they missed the bus, it's the worst day of their life. No, but teaching them like how to have emotional intelligence, like you talked about, especially when they're younger, it's going to set them up later on when things do matter and it's not the monster truck, it's something serious. Then they know how they should respond, which is key.
Yeah, definitely. The more that I consider myself, like I've grown a lot, right? The last couple of years for me have been exponential growth in terms of just what I would consider to be genuine masculinity, right? I was very selfish, very one-dimensional prior to the last couple of years, right? And I'm not proud to say that, but I'm also honest a bit about the fact that I needed to grow a lot. And the more that I've become a real man, right? Like all these things we're talking about, the more emotional I get about certain things that really matter to me, and I don't feel weak or any of that kind of stuff, because I believe it's the tender warrior, right? You're both. You're the warrior when you have to be, and you're the lover when that's also required. And when we're talking about our families or the people that really matter, or a tight-knit brotherhood where you're away from the world and you're kind of having that deep fellowship, like that's the time to let the armor down, right? And I've experienced so much more life, right? Like I've lived life to a higher degree because I'm more in control of my emotions, right? I'm not as angry when times call for it. I'm more stoic, right? In the stressful situations or in the midst of an argument, I'm not letting my anger take over. In moments that are very tender or sweet or sad, I'm more in touch with that side of me, right? Especially for my daughter, right? To help. We've had pets pass away. Like that example is great. Having to teach her how to grieve through those things. And, if I'm this shell of a man who's just always a robot all the time, I'm not useful to her in that scenario, right? And so if you're listening to this and you're kind of discounting that, the experiences I've had over the last couple of years are so much richer, right? The happier times are happy, the sadder times are deeper, and you build connection with those people. But if you are just this robot who cuts off all emotion, you miss out. You miss out on the highs of life because you're disconnected. And really where it comes into is human connection. Your emotions are the ways in which we truly connect non-verbally with those around us. And so if you're surrounded by the people you care about and love the most, that connection needs to be there. And if you're cutting that off from the emotional point of view, you're really missing out. You are only hurting yourself. So I just wanted to really drive that point home, because I think it's a balance, right? We're not talking about being this weepy, crying little thing everywhere you go. That's not what we're saying. But there has to be the mastery over that element of you, because you are a human. You do have things like sadness and fear and anxiety and stress and all that kind of stuff. You're not this robot. So just wanted to cap that one off of that. So Cody, why don't we shift into back to fatherhood stuff? We hit the masculinity thing pretty good there, and I love the direction you took that. What are some of the hardest lessons you've learned so far along the way, that, especially younger guys kind of starting out of their families, you wish you would have learned earlier on?
Oh man. For me, I think it's dealing with the unexpected. So obviously when you get pregnant with your spouse, like you probably have this vision of what it's going to look like, and typically it's way off. Like we can't predict the future, and you can't base off of what other people go through, because every pregnancy is different, every kid's different, every person's different. So I think having an open mind on what you're going to face, what you're going to feel, because you don't know what you don't know, and you think something, but reality is a total different thing. Theory and reality are two different things. So for me, it's really going with the punches, because there's a lot of stuff that I wasn't prepared for, not due to a lack of want, but just there's just things you can't prepare for everything. And especially when your kids are young, like it's a learning environment, things are going to happen. I think the worst thing you can do is bad things happen, right? Whatever it is not capturing that lesson learned, so that you don't make that same mistake later on, whether that's how you handle a situation or whether that's a health concern, etc. If you miss out on that opportunity to capture a lesson learned, good or bad, like, and make the same mistake again, then that's true failure. And so for me specifically, it's been dealing with some health things. So I think I was a little naive on how things are going to happen. All the births, we were healthy. All our kids were good sleepers. Therefore, we had them, back to back to back to back. But once everybody kind of got established, we started to run into some health issues. My oldest son, whose name's Bear, like the animal, he had some seizures the last couple years. He's had six, with the most recent in December, and the first one was pretty gnarly. And it's, I didn't do due diligence and prepare for that, but that is something that I was not aware of was even an option. And the first time was like, holy cow, like, what to do. And actually, more specifically, I wasn't even home. Like, my wife handled that all by herself. The second time I was home, and I've seen seizures before, like, I know what to do, but it's my son. And it's my oldest son, the one that's closest like me, named after my nickname as a kid. And watching him go through that, I was a bit of a mess. And if I'm being honest, I froze a little bit. Um, and one of the biggest challenges that I've had to acknowledge is I don't have all the answers. And I know it's tough as a man to say, like, I don't know what to do, or even more so, I have to ask for help. Like, that's my biggest red flag. We teach this thing called red flags at Echelon Front. Basically, when your emotions or ego are going to dictate your decision, your body will tell you that, right? And red flags are you clench your fist, you grit your teeth, you get that vein in your forehead, etc. Well, my mental red flag is when I think or I say in my head, I need to ask for help, I don't do it because I think that's weak, right? You don't do that as a man. Well, watching my son go through this, I'm like, I think I need to ask for help, or I don't know what to do. And I shut down a little bit. And I kind of snapped into it, and I was like, okay, I know who to call, I know what to do, and they helped me guide through that situation. But after that, I learned from it because me and my wife, we came up with the protocol because it happened four more times. And the first couple times were like the box, the ambulance, 911. It's a bit of a mess, kind of crazy. We just had one in December. My wife looks at me. We're sitting on the couch as a family right before Christmas. She goes, "Hey, it's gonna happen again." And like on cue, it happens. I tell my 5-year-old son, "Take your sisters in the other room, read a book." My wife handles this whole thing. Nobody else is involved. We stick with them through the night, and like we've done it 1,000 times. And so I think capturing your lessons learned as an individual, I think that's powerful because things continuously happen with kids, and the more kids you have, the more exposure to problems. For example, my youngest daughter had some stuff as well. So my son was seizures, and knock on wood, hopefully he's out of those. He's had six. My youngest daughter last year, um, we were living in California at a baseball game, and she fell about 15 feet on a concrete and fractured her skull. And in the moment, I didn't know if she was going to make it. Um, I'm in the bleachers. I'm looking down. I see her. She's face down, looking away, not moving, not breathing, or so I think. And like, what do you do in that situation? My wife gets up, tries to run for help. I look at my three other kids in the bleachers, and I tell my oldest, Bear, I'm like, "Hey, stay here. Watch your brother and sister." And I squeeze through the bleachers, and I drop down, and it was the longest 15 seconds of my life. I take about 15 steps. I pick her up. She comes to, and then it's up to me. One of the biggest things I've learned is capturing lessons learned. Absolutely, is things are going to go wrong. How you respond, that is completely up to you. There's going to be incidences when you're camping in the woods, when you're away from society, where stuff is going to happen and no one's going to come to save you. And I think one of the worst things that we can do as parents and as spouses is putting yourself or family in a situation where something can go wrong and you don't know what to do. And so I say luckily from the Marine Corps, I have some training on how to handle head injuries. So I pick her up, she comes to, thank God, and I'm feeling for her, anything externally. I'm looking at her eyes to see the pupil dilation, feeling the rest of her body, etc. Because what I know, luckily we were in a baseball game, so people are coming. I know that the EMT is going to cut the lock because we were locked inside this bleacher, and he's going to come to me for all the information. Nobody else. I'm the only one there. So I have a choice. I can calm down as best as I can, even though I'm outside my body. I can try to gather all the information I can, the time, how long she was unconscious, what I see, what I felt, etc. Because he's going to take my information to make a decision. Now he's going to go through his protocol, yes, but can I expedite his decision-making ability by my information? Absolutely. So, long story short, and sorry to take such a drastic turn, I think, look, kids are kids, and they're going to do crazy stuff. They're going to break bones. Bad things are going to happen, unfortunately, because they're kids. They're just living life, right? I think our response to things, and then additionally, more importantly, it's capturing lessons learned and growing yourself as an individual. Because I think what I never want to find myself in is in a situation where I had a chance to do something and I couldn't because I froze, or I didn't have the background or the education or the information, etc. I don't ever want to put myself in that situation. So it's as much as being a professional, like a speaker, I always want to grow and learn. Being a parent, it's no different. I have a freaking med kit in every car. I got the dechoker. I have all this stuff. Because sure, are there firefighters, police traditionally everywhere? Yes. But what if they're not? And it's up to me. Sometimes it's going to be up to you. And I think we can't be naive that think that we might find ourselves in that situation sooner or later.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing, obviously a very difficult experience. I think there's probably a lot of parents who've had similar scares listening to this, right? Can definitely relate to the intensity of emotions that flow over us in those types of situations. There's just something that happens different when it's your kid. But what an incredible lesson there in terms of, being prepared and not putting yourself in a situation or your family in a situation where you're not able to do that. And for you to walk through kind of the medical procedures there to help the team, like that's an example of whenever you learn that training doesn't really matter. You had it when you needed it. Right. And, I would agree too with in my own experience becoming a new parent, like just constantly learning from the lessons and constantly making improvements is the way to win, right? Because like you mentioned, stuff's going to happen, crazy things are going to happen. There's no way to prepare for all of it. And I counsel new dads on this a lot too. Is like, man, just where you're at right now, just soak it in, do some things to prepare, but don't go crazy with it. You can't control all the variables, right? And just constantly get better and do what works for you. Your family's different, lean into that. And so just appreciate you being very transparent about that experience.
Yes, sir.
And I think every family can benefit from having an emergency plan of some sort. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you definitely have one now, Cody, which is incredible. But I think most dads don't. And that's a huge opportunity, one, to show leadership by saying, okay, let's run through some drills or some bad situations. What if there's a fire in the house? What if one of our children is injured, like you mentioned? And it can be a good bonding experience for the entire family, one, and then two, it might get you ready for a situation that's really bad. So that's something I would encourage every dad, is to have an emergency plan ready for your family.
Yeah, I think the worst time to go over a plan or the worst time to learn a skill is when you have to use it. I don't think we're not superheroes, right? We're not just gonna the family knows exactly what to do even though I've never told them. Or this new skill that I just bought, I'm just I'll just rise to the occasion. That's not how it works. That's a naive mentality that's going to get us in trouble.
Yep. A quote comes to mind from good friend Matt Beaudreau. He says, the most dangerous thing about communication is assuming that it's happened. Right. And so, you may have thought it in your head, but you got to make sure and ask, especially with your kids, ask them to read back what you told them. Right. Okay. Hey, so what did I tell you to do? They're probably going to get it wrong, right? They're kids. So then you got to rehearse it with them over and over. And that's not talking down to them. I mean, shoot, we do that in the military, right? You back brief certain parts of an op order. So it's just a tool that makes sure that people internalize the right information. There's obviously a way to do it that's not condescending, but if it's your job. You talked earlier, Cody, about kind of future casting for yourself, right? And I think what we're talking here ties into ultimately vision, right? It's vision and awareness. And so when I say vision, I think there's two meanings, right, for men. One is the vision of you're scanning the horizon for danger, right? You're watchful, you're on guard, staying alert for things that could harm your family, right? That's half of vision. The other half is kind of that strategic planning, that long-term thinking, And I think that that is absolutely essential. It's not silly to say, hey, 30 years from now, I want to have these things happening. Is the road to get there going to be very windy and crazy? Of course, but you have to know the end state you want to arrive at to start navigating to it. And if you don't, you're just a ship on the water, just being tossed around wherever the wind's blowing, you know? And so I loved how you talked about that earlier. Hey, when my kids have kids, I want to be able to get up off the couch and play with them and do all the things with them. And if you're not thinking about that now in your 30s or 20s or whatever age you're at, you're setting you and your family up for failure. And men, vision rests with you. It's your responsibility to have that long-term vision. And that's not saying that women can't, but if we talk about roles and everything, that's where men shine the most, is watching out for danger and having that long-term strategic planning. So, I love that you brought that up, and I'm just curious if you had anything you wanted to add around kind of vision and planning, as head of a household.
Yeah, so strategic thinking, I think that's a skill set that not a lot of people have. We're very in the moment. We're very target focused. We're very focused on what's right in front of us, and that's good. There's tactical things we have to do, but you can still send the email, have the conversation, and still be thinking big picture, because that big picture is coming whether we like it or not. We can't stop time. Time is a thing, and I can't give you more time. The clock's ticking as we speak, and so for me, the end state, right, where I want to be, where I want my kids to be, is always at the forefront of my decisions, because that leads me to what decisions I make right now. So I know, George, you said understanding where you want to go. It's also important to understand where you're at and being truly honest with where you're at. Because I think what a lot of people have a hard time doing effectively, men specifically, is being honest with who they are in the moment, right? I'm a great dad. I have nothing left to learn. I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. You
You
may feel
gotta
that way, but
you gotta
that's not the
embrace
reality.
you gotta embrace the most difficult F word, feedback.
100%. So I think those two pieces, where you want to go and where you're going to be, and then the decisions in the middle, you have to have that end state in mind. Like, I know for me, you talked about, family values. Those have to play a role in the end state. Otherwise, those values aren't worth their weight in anything, right? So the reason I want my kids to be tough is because down the road, when they're 18, when they're 25, when they're 30, when they're 50, is hard things are going to happen. And if they don't have toughness, that mentality built with them, they're going to get ran over. They're going to get steamrolled by the world. So that's why that value is embedded now, so that it plays in down the road. Why I want my kids to be honest, why I want them to have ownership, is things are going to happen. They're going to make mistakes. Every single person in this world will make multiple mistakes. And so what are they going to do? They're going to lose their credibility. They're going to lose their word, which is, as a man, right? Like, my word is everything. Everybody says that. Every man I talk to, my word is my bond. Until push comes to shove, they do something wrong and then they don't follow up. And so those values, I think your values have to play a role in where you want to go down the road. So, for me, I mean, strategic's the name of the game. And I think, to your point, it is my role. I think an additional benefit of being married for me is I have to be aligned with my spouse, with my wife, on what that vision is, because I'm half the battle. And for me specifically, I travel a bunch. Last year I was gone 235 days. So that vision that, I'm supposed to embed in my kids, my wife plays a huge role as well. Now, she has other things that she's working on and other things that she's way better than I am, but she has to be a part of that vision and mission, because what I don't want to do is I'm pulling the kids this way and she's pulling the kids this way. Then we create disconnect. Now we're not aligned. And I think alignment is the name of the game in marriage, right? If you and your spouse aren't aligned, then you have team
Completely.
mom, you have team dad, and that creates frustration and this fracture in a relationship. And you do that now, that's only lead to bad things down the road. So, I mean, I
Right.
love the thought of strategic thinking in itself. It's something that a lot of people don't have the foresight, right, to see down the road or even think that big. We're target fixated people, and that's a habit we have to
Yep.
break.
Yeah, I love that you made the distinction that, like, it's definitely in conjunction with your spouse, right? You're not like this, you're not just going off on your own. And I just want to like double tap that real quick before Brandon asks you the next question. And when I say men, it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to craft it and start it. And you take input from your wife. You're not operating in a vacuum. It's a team effort, but like a commander in the military, right? You state the desired end state, the commander's intent, all that kind of stuff, and then you're inviting input from everyone else. So in the same way in your marriage, right? Like you have to be the one driving. You're ultimately the one responsible, but you of course take feedback from your wife, input. You guys have to align on where you want to get to and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you have to drive it forward. So I just want to make that very clear. I'm not disparaging wives, that they're a humongous part of the equation. Your marriage has to be aligned. I love that you said that. Without doing that, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, and you're also modeling the kind of person that your children are going to look for in the future, right? And children may not be very good at listening to their parents, but they've never failed to imitate them, right? And so you got to make sure that you're, like you said, you're modeling it and you're actually following through with what you say you're going to do. And that brings us to legacy, right? The true measure of a father's legacy lies not with what he achieves for himself, but the character and the compassion he nurtures in his children. And so my question to you is, how are you nurturing legacy in your children, and what's the kind of legacy that you want to leave for them?
I think legacy in general for parents specifically, I think it's one of the hardest things to wrap our minds around, right? Because look, human beings, all of us, like humans are selfish. Like, and that goes back to the dawn of time where it's self-preservation. Like, I need to put myself first to make sure that saber-toothed tiger doesn't kill. Like, that's where it starts. Then here we are in 2024, and I'm 32 years old, and we have these selfish tendencies, right? And I know a lot of people say, I talk to a lot of parents. Anytime I teach, which I teach leadership, I always tie in the personal side because it's really relatable. It's hard when I teach a blue collar, white collar, hey, what I did in the Marine Corps, because they're not Marines. But when I can talk to, I'm a dad and I'm a husband, that clicks a little bit. So I talk a lot about the family dynamic because it's leadership in itself. Because all leadership is, the definition of leadership to me is it's influence. That's all it is. And so I think a lot of people have this thought that, my legacy for my kids is I want my kids to be better than I was, right? I want them to accomplish more. I want them to make more money. I want them to be better humans, whatever. I think a lot of people say that, but I don't think a lot of people mean it. I think deep down inside our egos are like, you know what? I hope my kid gets like right here, but he doesn't get as good as me. I hate to even say that out loud, but I think that's the reality of a lot of people. And so for me, I truly have to be honest with myself. And look, I'm a speaker, I'm a Marine, I've done a lot of cool stuff, I'm doing a lot of cool stuff. And so if that's my legacy, is I want my kids to be more successful or to be better people or to, leave their legacy on the world, well, I need to set them up for success. I need to carve them a path. They're 6'5", 4 and 2. They don't know how to tie their shoes yet. And so my job is I want them to be better than me in all aspects of my life I need to start them on that path. And some
Yeah.
parents, I feel like they see like, ooh, and especially when they get older, like, ooh, they should be catching up to me, and then they withdraw themselves, they withhold information, they withhold lessons learned, what to do, what not to do, because of the selfish tendencies that we have. So I think for me, specifically with my younger kids, is I want them on the path, and I have to show them that path, and I have to show them how hard it's going to be, and I have to be honest with my end state. And if I can't be honest and upfront with my kids, like, hey, you know what, sons and daughters, like, I want you to be more successful. And success, how you measure that is a plethora of reasons. I want you to be a good person. I want you to, have good relationships. I want you to leave an impact on the world. I want you to take care of people. I have to set them up for success. And I have to set that up for success right now. And I know it's a 6-year-old, right, who's still fascinated with cars and monster trucks. But to your point, my kids are watching everything that I do. And if I'm withholding, not helping them, not setting them up for success, I can't be naive to think that they're not going to catch on, because like
Yeah.
our kids are a lot smarter than we think. I know they don't have the perspective, right? But we don't have all the perspective either. Like, I don't think anybody can ever have enough perspective because I'm only one person. So I think it's finding out that path, and is that path going to change throughout their life for all 4 of my kids? Hell yes. Who they are now and who they are tomorrow, who they are in 5 years, they're going to be different. But it's my job to establish some guardrails, right? So to say, are they going to bump into those guardrails? Yeah, they're kids and humans. But my job is to make sure they're there so they don't drive the car off the cliff. Because I want that path to be open so that down the road, when they become their own parents, they become spouses, they're almost there. They're 80, they're 85%. Because the last, 15% of legacy is what they do when you're not around, when they're not in your house. And truly, that's really up to them. And our job is still support them and still have honest conversations. But that last 15%, if you've done it right, that 15%, that path is relatively easier. But if you haven't done your job, that last 15%, they don't know what to do. And then they take that step off and there's no guardrail and they crash and burn. And then it's like, how did my 18-year-old do that? Like, well, because you didn't set them up for success. So I think that's a hard thought in itself to wrap our minds around. Because I think all parents, if you ask all parents, every parent's going to say, yeah, I want my kid to be more successful with me. But I think if you were to hook some people up to some lie detectors, I think they would find out how honest they truly are about that scenario.
I would say that the same people that disengage right before their kids surpass them in greatness are the same people that don't like to see other people win.
I would agree with
So
you.
it's a practice. It's a learned skill, in my opinion. I think it's something that you have to learn. You have to learn to love to see other people win. And so, like you said, you have to practice these things yourself. And I practice that all the time with my friends, my family, my coworkers. Even if they take a job over me, I'm like, hey, man, congratulations, you know, and I'm so excited for them. And I'm doing that honestly and earnestly. Like I'm checking the intent of my heart. And then that way it rolls off to my family, right? So great points, man. Loved it.
Cody, I would just like to thank you for the incredible suggestion that's now going to happen for all the in-person podcasts we do. We'll have a lie detector and ask that question to everyone.
Perfect.
There you go.
They're like, what's going on here?
So
All right,
here's
Dustin,
my
take it away.
confession for sure. I'm 6'4". I really want my son to be 6'3" and like a half inch. I know it's terrible, but that would be awesome. So,
Yeah, but when you get old, you're going to shrink and slouch. He'll pass.
I
you
know
anyway,
that he's going to catch me exactly. But
That's
let's
true.
give me a
Yep.
couple of years, you know, where I get to be just a half inch taller. That's all I want. So Cody, a question we ask all the dads who come on, and it's always such a joy to hear your answers. Share a core memory with us that you'll never forget. And not that you have a favorite child, but you know, pick whichever one you want, and tell us a great story about them growing up.
Oh man, a core memory. So I go back to just the context. I travel a bunch. I've said that multiple times, but um, I'm gonna get to the answer, but I have to build this path, right? So a lot of people ask me, you know, how do I balance work and home, right? You know, work life balance, because what you do at work carries back to home and home carries back to work, blah blah blah. And I think a lot of people, they say the 50-50 answer, and I don't think that's plausible, right? That's not feasible, especially when I travel more days than I'm home. So right there, I'm already set up for failure. So for me, when I'm at work, right, when I'm on the road, like I'm all in. I'm 97% unless an emergency happens. I have to be. It's my job, and people are leaning to me for leadership, how to lead their teams and their families, etc. On the flip side, when I get home, I'm all in. And when I say I'm all in, I'm all in. I'm not wasting the time that I have, because my kids, they're old enough now. They know when I'm gone, and they miss me truly. I was just gone 5 days. I leave again on Wednesday. I'm gone till Sunday again. Like, my kids are aware, and they start to miss me now. And so if I'm gone and then I come home and I just half-ass my dad responsibility, I'm gonna build, whether they consciously or subconsciously are aware of it. "Man, I kind of like it when dad's gone," and I don't ever want that to happen. So when I'm home, I am all in 1,000%. So I'm extremely intentional with the time that I have, which leads me into core memory. I travel a bunch for work. I travel a bunch when I'm at home, because when I'm home, we do everything that you can possibly think of. And it sounds crazy to a lot of people, more parent or people that don't have kids. We go all over the place. Last year for my birthday, which is in August, we drove to Yellowstone like 16 hours with 4 kids, and it was freaking mayhem. Like the car ride there, but it's, and as much as core memories, a lot of people think it's this, fascinating. Like we went to Disneyland, we did that a couple months ago, like these big high end things. I think it's more like the little things. It's the drives, it's the pit stops, it's the gas stations. It's just time being together. And sure, being at Disney World or being on top of a mountain together, like that. Um, the environment, yes, does that elevate the memory potentially? But I have just as much fun, sitting at home playing football in the backyard than I did taking my kids to the Diamondbacks game the other day. Like, it doesn't matter where I'm at if I'm intentional with my time. So for me, I build a core memory every time I'm with my kids. And I know some people might say you don't have the capacity to do that, but that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to, when I just went to the gym when my wife was gone and worked out and my 4 kids were working out with me, like, I want them to remember that down the road. I'm a little naive probably that they're not gonna remember that one time, but I do that enough, they're gonna remember, like, I remember working out with dad when I was a kid. Like, that's my goal. And so for me, I wouldn't give you one thing because, man, we go to Yosemite, Yellowstone, we went to Disneyland, we travel, we do crazy stuff that nobody wants to do with kids. I do it all the time. I embrace it. And sure, does some of it suck, for lack of a better word? That drive back from Yellowstone when our car broke down and two of my kids were throwing up the entire 14 hours. Yeah, that sucked. But you know who's gonna remember that? I'm gonna remember that. And you know what? I had a hell of a time doing that. So for me, if I'm intentional with my time and I do my dad responsibilities the right way, I have the possibility of making a lot more core memories without the added context of a crazy environment to aid to it. It can be just
Yeah,
a
man.
couch. It can be a tent in the backyard. It can be bedtime doing a story on the floor. You have the potential to make those core memories anywhere. It doesn't have to be this extravagant environment that helps you create it.
Yeah, man. That man, I'm so glad you said that. That is one of the best answers we've heard to that question on this show for sure. And it's such a good reminder to every dad, capitalize on the little moments. You don't have to spend money. Get out some cards or draw with your kid, whatever. Just do one of the little things, like, I look back on your own childhood. Look at the things you remember from your childhood that like are positive, right? They're probably, most of them, those small moments. It's not just the big things. So, that consistency, Cody, what you're talking about, and like doing those things constantly with your kids, like that is, they will carry that forever. And then they'll do the same with their families one day. Like that is such an amazing answer and such a great point to just remind ourselves to take advantage of those smaller moments and don't slow down. Like it's so easy for us to stay in like mission mode and grind, and then you pass up all those small moments, and then later in life you're full of regret, right?
Mm.
Those tiny moments are just so worth it. So man, I love that answer. I'm all fired up now. So Cody, where's the best place that people can find you, get connected with you? And obviously they can look up Echelon Front. Would highly recommend for pretty much everyone, but you personally, Cody, where can people find you?
Yeah, so due to bandwidth and what I do, I'm only on Instagram of all the social media channels. So it's just Cody, Codey .Gandy. I'm on Instagram there, trying my best to get on there. I just spend a lot of time talking about my family and what I do on there and the fun things that I deal with as a dad. Like I know the other day I posted a picture of a bunch of fruit that we have and all my kids took little bites out of it. Like there was an apple that
Yeah,
was disgusting, there was like a
bunch of
pear,
animals.
there was a banana that somebody took a bite out of the banana peel. Like it's just little things like that because I like to show transparency on. I think a lot of people use social media to show the perfectness of their life, and as kids,
Yep.
that doesn't exist. Like
Mm-mm.
sometimes it's a little rough, but it's what you make of it. So just on Instagram, and then yeah, Echelon Front. That's just the website, echelonfront.com. Leadership consultancy, wherever you can think of, whatever company has people that work with people, that's who we work with. So we're all over the place. We'll be in Nashville next week for a muster, which is 1,000 people Friday and Saturday. So traveling the world, spreading leadership, and then trying to get as much time as I can with my kids back here in Arizona. So that's where you can find me.
Hey man, that's awesome. Do you have any final thoughts before we close?
Actually, you just spurred it, George. You said something about slowing down, and I think on social media, you know, the algorithm, whatever they say, like I get a lot of parenting and dad stuff, which I love. Instead of I could have gone the wrong way in that realm, but there was something that was saying like involving your kids in things. It makes it longer, right? Having your kids help with breakfast. I have my kids take part of my workouts, and would it be a lot easier if I did things by myself? Absolutely. If I want to work on an email in my office by myself, yes. But I can pop up some chairs and have my kids work on a pretend laptop and they'll enjoy it just as much. And the quote basically was, involving your kids, it slows you down. And then it says, like, isn't that the point? Because to your point, George, the point is to be present and to cherish the time that you have. So involving your kids, it does slow you down, but that's intentional because we're fast paced, we're mission focused, we're on to the next thing. We're already thinking about, I can't wait to put my kids to bed. I'm like, no, you know what? I want to cherish the story time that I'm having right now. So I think involving our kids, it slows you down, but it should be intentional because we're busy people, we're fast
Yeah.
paced, but it's urging you to be present with the time that you have because it's 18 years. And I think I'll be willing to bet the most common feedback any new parents get from other parents is it goes by fast. And the reason why everybody says that is because that's the reality. It goes by fast. So slow
Yep.
down, embrace the time you have, be intentional, take it in, because it's going to be over before you know it.
Yeah. And when we slow down to it, it's the temptation is just like do it ourselves, right? But then what your kids miss out on is learning how to do that thing, right? And so by slowing down, you allow them to build skills and confidence. And there's just so much goodness that comes from those little moments like that. So yeah, man, great way to close. Love it so much. Cody, thank you for your time. Thanks for your wisdom. Thanks for sharing your story. Just really appreciate all you're doing. And hopefully we can support you moving forward. I'll try and link up with you here when you visit Nashville. And with that, dads, we will close this episode. Let's get climbing that mountain of fatherhood. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you're on YouTube, drop a subscription to us. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. It helps greatly. If you are also ready to level up as a man, check out Elite Sentinel Coaching, our program designed specifically for men, where we forge men into leaders. We turn cowards into kings, weaklings into warriors. Become the hero in your story. Join us today.